My uncle declared at my graduation party my disability was made up for attention. My specialist was in the room. The champagne glass in my hand was halfway to my lips when Uncle Dennis's voice cut through the celebration noise in our backyard. Can we all just acknowledge the elephant in the room? Kaylee graduated college after 6 years instead of 4 because she's been milking this whole chronic fatigue excuse since she was 18. Some of us work full-time jobs while dealing with real problems. 38 people stopped talking. My mother's hand froze on the cake knife. My younger sister stopped mid-laugh. Everyone turned to look at either Dennis or me. I felt my body respond the way it always did to stress, with immediate exhaustion washing over me, making my arms feel like they weighed 100 pounds each. The glass trembled in my hand, and I had to set it down before I dropped it. Across the patio, Dr. Vivian Zhao, my rheumatologist of 4 years, slowly lowered her plate. She'd been invited as my +1 because I'd mentioned how isolated I felt at family events, and she'd offered to come provide moral support. Dennis was just getting started, apparently emboldened by the alcohol in the audience. I mean, look at her standing there perfectly fine, but somehow she's too sick to work more than 20 hours a week. Too sick to help with family events. Too sick to visit her grandmother in the nursing home. It's always something with Kaylee. He looked around for support and found several nodding heads, including my cousin Brad and my aunt Stephanie. My father was staring at his shoes. My mother's face had gone pale, but she said nothing. Dennis took a long drink from his beer. The timing is real convenient too. Gets diagnosed right before college so she can get disability accommodations and extra time on tests. 6 years to finish what everyone else does in 4. Meanwhile, she's got energy to go to concerts with her friends and post on social media about her hobbies. Seems pretty selective, this fatigue. He made air quotes around the word fatigue. Several people laughed. My grandmother nodded slowly, which felt worse than anything else. 4 years of specialist appointments, 3 hospitalizations, dozens of tests. A diagnosis that took 18 months to confirm because doctors kept dismissing my symptoms, and my own family thought I was faking. Dr. Zhao stood up, and her movement was deliberate and commanding. She was a petite woman, barely 5 feet tall, but when she stood, everyone paid attention. Excuse me, I'm Dr. Vivian Zhao. I'm a rheumatologist at University Medical Center, and I've been treating Kaylee for 4 years for systemic lupus erythematosus with secondary chronic fatigue syndrome. The color drained from Dennis's face, but he recovered quickly, trying to look skeptical. Oh, I didn't realize. I thought you were just a friend from school or something. Dr. Zhao pulled out her phone and held it up. I'm recording this conversation from this point forward. What you just said constitutes harassment of a disabled person and medical defamation. I want everyone here to understand that I'm speaking not as Kaylee's friend, but as her treating physician with 4 years of documented medical history. She looked directly at Dennis. Systemic lupus erythematosus is an autoimmune disease where the body attacks its own tissues and organs. It causes joint pain, extreme fatigue, organ damage, and dozens of other symptoms that fluctuate unpredictably. Kaylee has been hospitalized 3 times for lupus flares severe enough to require IV steroids and monitoring. She takes 8 medications daily just to prevent her immune system from destroying her kidneys. Dennis tried to interrupt, but Dr. Zhao held up her hand. I'm not finished. The reason Kaylee took 6 years to complete college is because there were entire semesters when she physically could not attend classes due to disease activity. She has medical withdrawal documentation from 2 separate semesters when her illness became too severe to continue. She didn't get extra time on tests for fun. She got accommodations because cognitive dysfunction is a documented symptom of lupus that affects memory, processing speed, and concentration. Her brain literally doesn't work the same way during flares because inflammation affects neural function. Her voice was calm but had an edge that made everyone listen. You mentioned she goes to concerts and posts about hobbies. What you're seeing is her good days, the days when medication is working and disease activity is low. What you don't see are the weeks she spends in bed unable to shower or make food because standing for 5 minutes makes her heart race and her body shut down. You don't see the daily pain that requires prescription medication to manage. You don't see the medical bills that have bankrupted her, or the friendships she's lost because she can't maintain normal social schedules. My mother had tears streaming down her face, but she still hadn't spoken. My father finally looked up from his shoes, and his expression was shifting from embarrassed to horrified. Dennis sat frozen with his beer still in his hand, staring at Dr. Zhao as his worldview crumbled in real time. Dr. Zhao turned to address everyone. Invisible illnesses are called invisible because you can't see them. That doesn't make them any less real or debilitating. Lupus is a serious chronic condition that requires constant medical management and has no cure. Kaylee has accomplished something remarkable by finishing college at all, given what her body has been fighting against for the past 6 years. Instead of celebrating that achievement with her, you're accusing her of faking because she doesn't look sick enough for your standards. She put her phone away. As Kaylee's physician, I'm documenting this incident as a significant stressor that will likely trigger a disease flare. Stress is a known lupus trigger. What just happened here will probably put her in bed for days or weeks. Congratulations on that. She turned to me. Kaylee, do you want to leave? Because I think we should go. I nodded, unable to speak. My hands were shaking badly now, and I could feel the familiar pre-flare symptoms starting. Racing heart, nausea, that bone-deep exhaustion that made every movement feel like swimming through concrete. Dr. Zhao took my arm gently, and we started toward the house to get my purse. Behind us, the backyard erupted. My mother was crying loudly, asking Dennis how he could say those things. My sister was yelling at Dennis, calling him cruel and ignorant. My father's voice was raised, telling Dennis to leave. Dennis defending himself, saying he was just being honest, that someone needed to say it. My grandmother's wavering voice asking if anyone wanted more potato salad. We made it to Dr. Zhao's car before my legs gave out. She'd parked close to the house because she'd seen how tired I was when we arrived earlier. I sank into the passenger seat, my whole body trembling. She checked my pulse, timing it against her watch. 138 beats per minute. You're in the beginning of a flare response. We need to get you home, get your medication levels checked, and monitor you for the next 24 hours. I managed to ask through chattering teeth, even though the day was warm. Should I go to the hospital? Dr. Zhao started the car. Not yet. But if your heart rate stays elevated or you develop a fever, we'll go to the ER. Right now, I'm taking you to my house because you need medical supervision and I don't trust that your family environment is safe. She pulled out of the driveway. How long has your family been questioning your diagnosis? I thought about all the comments over the years. My father suggesting I just needed to exercise more and eat better. My mother hinting that maybe I was depressed, not physically ill. My uncle's constant remarks about young people these days always finding excuses. The implications that I was lazy, attention-seeking, manipulative. Since I was diagnosed, maybe before that when I was having symptoms but no one could figure out what was wrong. They took me to doctors, but when tests came back normal, they started saying it was all in my head. When I finally got the lupus diagnosis at 19, part of me was relieved because it meant I wasn't crazy. But my family acted like nothing changed. They still treated me like I was making excuses. Dr. Zhao's grip tightened on the steering wheel. Your medical records show a 2-year delay between symptom onset and diagnosis. That delay likely caused permanent damage that could have been prevented if doctors had taken you seriously earlier. Your family's attitude contributed to that delay. If you're taught from childhood to minimize your symptoms and doubt yourself, you don't advocate for proper care. She glanced at me. I need to ask you something. Has your family's attitude affected your treatment adherence or your willingness to seek care when you need it? The question hit hard because the answer was yes. I'd skipped medications because my father complained about the cost. I'd pushed through severe symptoms at family events because I was afraid they'd say I wasn't trying hard enough. I delayed going to the ER during a bad flare because I didn't want to deal with my mother's comments about medical bills and hospital drama. I haven't been taking my medication as prescribed. The immunosuppressant costs $800 a month even with insurance. My dad made comments about the expense, so I've been taking it every other day instead of daily to make it last longer. Dr. Zhao pulled over suddenly into a parking lot. She turned to face me fully. Kaylee, that medication is keeping your lupus from destroying your kidneys. Taking it every other day means you're essentially unprotected from disease progression. Your next kidney function test is going to show damage, and it's going to be permanent damage that was completely preventable. Her voice was firm, but not angry. What your family is doing to you is medical neglect. That's the clinical term. They're undermining your treatment. They're creating barriers to care. They're causing you psychological stress that triggers physical disease flares. This is a form of abuse, and it needs to be addressed immediately. The word abuse shocked me, but they're family. They love me. They just don't understand. Dr. Zhao started driving again. Love and abuse aren't mutually exclusive. People can love you while still harming you, especially when they're operating from ignorance or denial. What your uncle did today wasn't about you. It was about his need to feel superior, his need for simple answers to complex problems. People with chronic illness threaten that worldview because we're evidence that bad things happen to people who didn't do anything wrong. We drove in silence. I watched the city pass by, feeling disconnected from my body, which was spiraling into full flare mode. Every joint ached. My skin felt like it was burning. The fatigue was so overwhelming I could barely keep my eyes open. Dr. Zhao's apartment was in a modern building near the hospital. She helped me inside, steadied me when I swayed getting out of the car. She settled me on her couch with blankets and water. She checked my vitals again, took detailed notes in what looked like a personal medical journal. I'm calling some people who need to know what happened. Is that okay? I nodded, too exhausted to question. She disappeared into another room, and I could hear her voice, professional and clipped, talking about medical abuse, patient advocacy, hostile family environments. When she returned, she had a notebook and sat across from me. We need to talk about your living situation. You mentioned you live with your parents still. I explained that after graduation, I'd planned to move out but couldn't afford it on disability payments alone. I worked 20 hours a week as a medical transcriptionist from home, which was all my body could handle. My parents charged me minimal rent, and I needed their help on bad days. My medical debt from before getting on insurance was $40,000. I couldn't qualify for an apartment on my income. Dr. Zhao wrote things down. How often do your parents actually help when you're having a flare? Transportation to appointments, meal prep, basic care needs. I considered honestly. Not much. They both work and they're busy. Mom sometimes drives me to appointments if she's available, but mostly I manage alone. They get frustrated when I need help because it interferes with their schedule. Her expression tightened. So you're paying them rent to live in an environment where they question your illness, undermine your treatment, and don't provide support during medical crises. That's not sustainable or safe. She put down her notebook. I want to tell you something personal. My brother Kevin has multiple sclerosis. Diagnosed 6 years ago. For the first year, our family didn't understand. My parents thought he was being dramatic. I was in medical school, and I'm ashamed to say I thought he just needed to try harder to push through symptoms. I was completely wrong. Her voice carried old guilt. Kevin tried to kill himself 14 months after diagnosis. He left a note saying he couldn't handle being a burden anymore, couldn't handle people not believing how much he was suffering. He survived, but barely. That's when I finally understood what I'd been doing to him. The confession hung in the air between us. That's why you specialize in autoimmune conditions? Dr. Zhao nodded. I dedicated my career to helping patients like you because I failed my own brother when he needed me. When I saw what happened at your graduation party, I saw Kevin standing there hearing the same things from people who should have protected him. She stood up. I'm going to make some calls tomorrow to connect you with resources. A social worker who specializes in disability housing. A therapist who understands chronic illness trauma. Maybe a disability rights attorney because what happened today may have legal implications. But tonight you need to rest and let me monitor your vitals. Your heart rate is still too high and I want to make sure this doesn't develop into a full crisis. She went to her kitchen and I heard her preparing something. She came back with soup and medication. This is prednisone. I'm starting you on a burst dose to try to prevent this flare from getting worse. And you're staying here tonight. No arguments. I was too exhausted to argue anyway. I took the medication and managed a few bites of soup before everything got too heavy to continue. I slept for 16 hours. When I woke up late afternoon the next day, sunlight was filtering through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then everything came flooding back. The graduation party, Dennis's accusations, Dr. Zhao's intervention, the humiliation of having my illness questioned in front of everyone. I checked my phone and immediately regretted it. 49 missed calls, 73 text messages, multiple voicemails. I scrolled through dreading what I'd find. My mother's messages were frantic. Kaylee, please call. Dennis left in tears. Your father is furious. We need to talk about this. Your doctor had no right to make a scene like that. My father's texts were colder. You embarrassed this family by involving your doctor in personal family matters. We need to discuss your living arrangements and your attitude toward people who are trying to help you. My sister's messages were different. What the hell just happened? Mom's a mess and Dad's raging. Dennis is telling everyone you set him up to be attacked by your doctor. Call me. Multiple messages from relatives, some sympathetic, most critical. Dennis had apparently spent the evening texting everyone his version of events where he was the victim of an unprovoked attack by my aggressive doctor. Dr. Zhao knocked softly. You're awake. How do you feel? I did a mental inventory. Heart rate still elevated, every joint screaming with pain. Butterfly rash across my cheeks that meant my lupus was active. Cognitive fog making it hard to think clearly. Starting a bad flare. She came in with breakfast and my morning medications. I figured. Your inflammatory markers were elevated on the last test and stress is going to make everything worse. This flare will probably last 10 to 14 days, possibly longer. She sat down. I've been making calls. I spoke with a social worker named Judith Klein who helps people with disabilities navigate housing and family issues, a therapist named Dr. Marcus Finley who specializes in chronic illness trauma, and an attorney named Lawrence Brennan who handles disability discrimination cases. They all want to meet with you if you're interested. I stared at her. You did all that already? Dr. Zhao smiled slightly. I told you I failed my brother. I'm not failing another patient the same way. What happened yesterday showed me that your home environment is actively making you sicker. As your physician, I have an obligation to address that. She handed me a paper with names and numbers. These are your resources, but I also want to suggest you consider moving out of your parents' house as soon as possible. Living with people who don't believe your illness is real and who undermine your treatment is dangerous. I explained again about finances, how disability payments didn't cover rent anywhere in the city, how my part-time work wasn't enough, how my medical debt made it impossible to qualify for credit or loans. Dr. Zhao listened, then said, Judith, the social worker, specializes in finding solutions for exactly this situation. Subsidized disability housing, shared living situations with other chronically ill people, programs that provide housing assistance for people escaping unhealthy family environments. There are options. She pulled out her laptop and showed me data. I've been tracking your medical records for patterns. Your flare frequency correlates directly with family stress. After major family holidays, you consistently have increased symptom severity. Your worst hospitalization was 3 days after Thanksgiving last year. Do you remember what happened at Thanksgiving? I remembered. My uncle had given a whole speech about personal responsibility and how his generation didn't make excuses. My grandmother had suggested I try a positive attitude instead of medications. Dennis had brought up a news article about millennials faking disabilities to avoid work. I'd ended up in the hospital with a lupus nephritis flare that required 3 days of IV steroids. That hospitalization cost $18,000 after insurance. The flare damaged your kidneys. Your GFR dropped from 85 to 78. That damage is permanent. Dr. Zhao closed her laptop. Your family environment is literally destroying your organs. This isn't about hurt feelings or family drama. This is about survival. The word survival felt dramatic, but looking at my medical history, maybe it wasn't. My phone started ringing, my mother's name on the screen. Dr. Zhao looked at me. You don't have to answer. You're allowed to take space to recover. I let it go to voicemail. Mom's voice came through frantic when the voicemail notification appeared. Kaylee, please come home so we can talk. Dennis feels terrible about what happened. He was drunk and didn't mean it the way it sounded. Your father and I are worried about you. This doctor seems to be filling your head with ideas about your family not supporting you. We've always supported you. We're paying your medical bills, helping you with rent. We love you. Please just come home and we'll work this out. I played it for Dr. Zhao. Her expression hardened. Notice how she never acknowledges what Dennis actually said. She's minimizing it, and she's turning me into the villain who's manipulating you instead of addressing the actual harm. Over the next week, I stayed at Dr. Zhao's apartment recovering from the flare. She checked my vitals twice daily, monitored my kidney function with point-of-care testing she had at home. She made sure I took all my medications properly for the first time in months. She connected me with Judith, the social worker, who started helping me apply for subsidized disability housing. The waiting list was 6 to 8 months, but it was a start. Dr. Finley, the therapist, started video sessions helping me understand what medical trauma meant and how years of invalidation had affected my mental health. My family kept calling, texting, showing up at Dr. Zhao's building trying to get past security. My father left a voicemail saying if I didn't come home and apologize to Dennis within a week, they'd stop helping with my medical bills and I'd be on my own. My mother sent texts about how I was tearing the family apart by being stubborn. Dennis sent a long email claiming he'd been taken out of context and that Dr. Zhao had edited the recording to make him look bad. He said he was considering legal action against her for defamation. Lawrence, the attorney, reviewed everything when we met via video call. He listened to Dr. Zhao's recording of the graduation party. He read through the text messages from my family. He looked at my medical records showing the correlation between family stress and disease flares. You have grounds for several legal actions here. Dennis's statements constitute disability discrimination and defamation. Your parents threatening to withdraw financial support because you won't apologize to your abuser is financial coercion, and if we can prove they've been undermining your medical treatment, that's medical neglect, which can be prosecuted. He leaned forward on the screen. But I need to be honest. Family lawsuits are brutal. Even when you win legally, you lose relationships. Your entire extended family will take sides. It gets ugly. He paused. That said, sometimes legal action is the only way to protect yourself and set boundaries that actually stick. The question is, are you prepared for that? I thought about my father's threats, my mother's manipulation, Dennis's lies about editing recordings, the years of minimization and doubt and dismissal. They've already torn it apart. I'm just recognizing it now. Lawrence nodded. Good. That's the clarity we need. Here's what I suggest. We send a cease and desist letter to Dennis demanding he stop making false statements about your medical condition publicly or privately. We give him 10 days to comply and to issue a written apology acknowledging his statements were false and harmful. If he refuses, we file a defamation suit. We also send a letter to your parents documenting their threats and putting them on notice that financial coercion of a disabled dependent is illegal. He pulled up documents. There's also the Americans with Disabilities Act angle. Your family's behavior could be seen as creating a hostile environment that interferes with your access to necessary care and accommodations. That's a civil rights violation in certain contexts. Over the next hour, Lawrence walked through options, timelines, costs, and likely outcomes. By the end, my head was spinning, but I understood the path. Send the letters, document everything. Prepare for the family relationships to get worse before they got better if they ever got better. That evening, Dr. Zhao made dinner and we ate quietly. She didn't pressure me to talk, just let me exist in a space where nobody questioned if I was really sick. Around 9, my sister Jenna showed up at the building. Dr. Zhao answered the intercom and her voice was careful. Unless you're here to apologize to your sister, you need to leave. Jenna's voice came through small and frustrated. I need to talk to Kaylee. Mom and Dad are losing it. Dennis is threatening to sue. This whole thing is spiraling and I'm stuck in the middle. Dr. Zhao looked at me. Do you want to see her? Part of me did. Jenna and I had been close before lupus changed everything. But I also remembered she'd been at that party. She'd been silent when Dennis attacked me. She'd chosen family peace over defending me. Not tonight. I'm not ready. Dr. Zhao relayed the message. Jenna tried to argue, but Dr. Zhao cut her off. Your sister is recovering from a disease flare that was directly triggered by your uncle's behavior and your family's failure to intervene. When she's ready to talk, she'll reach out. Until then, respect her boundaries. She disconnected the intercom. Good job setting a boundary. That's harder than it sounds, especially with family. The next morning, my mother called Dr. Zhao directly. She must have gotten the number from the hospital directory. I heard Dr. Zhao's half of the conversation from the guest room. Mrs. Lambert, I understand you're concerned, but Kaylee is an adult and she's made the choice not to speak with family right now. That's her right. Pause while my mother argued. No, she's not being held against her will. She's recovering from a lupus flare in a safe, supervised environment. She can leave whenever she wants. Another pause. I'm not manipulating her. I'm providing medical care and ensuring she has space to recover without additional stress that would worsen her condition. Dr. Zhao's voice got sharper. Mrs. Lambert, let me be very clear. What happened at the graduation party was medical abuse. Your daughter was publicly humiliated for having a legitimate diagnosed disability. Not one person at that party defended her, including you. That failure has consequences. If you want to rebuild your relationship with Kaylee, you need to acknowledge the harm and educate yourself about lupus. Longer pause. I'm giving you the contact information for Dr. Finley. He runs a support group for families of people with chronic illness. I strongly recommend you attend. Until then, Kaylee will contact you when she's ready. She hung up and came into the guest room. Your mother is very upset. She thinks I'm turning you against your family. She sat down. Kaylee, I need to be transparent. What I'm doing goes beyond typical doctor-patient boundaries. Most physicians would have intervened at the party, maybe given a brief education, and then backed off. I'm going further because of my personal history, and because I can see your family dynamics are directly impacting your health. But your mother isn't entirely wrong that this is unusual. She looked at me seriously. If at any point you feel uncomfortable with my level of involvement, you can tell me. You can switch to another rheumatologist in the practice. I won't take it personally, and it won't affect your care. I want to make sure you don't feel pressured because that would defeat the purpose. I thought about it. You saved me. At that party, you stood up when nobody else would. You've treated me like my illness is real and valid. You've helped me understand that what my family's been doing is wrong. I don't feel manipulated. I feel protected for the first time in years. Dr. Zhao's shoulders relaxed. Okay, but if that changes, tell me immediately. She showed me her phone. I need to show you something. Dennis has been very active on social media. She pulled up Facebook. Dennis had made multiple posts telling a completely different version of events. According to him, he'd expressed gentle concern about my well-being, suggesting I might need mental health support in addition to physical treatment. My aggressive doctor had attacked him verbally without provocation. She'd recorded him without consent and threatened legal action for asking legitimate questions about my health. He painted himself as a caring uncle victimized by an overreaching medical professional who'd crossed ethical boundaries. The post had hundreds of interactions. People I'd never met were calling Dr. Zhao unprofessional. Several of my relatives had commented agreeing with Dennis's version. My cousin Brad wrote about how I'd always been dramatic even as a kid. My Aunt Stephanie shared the post with a long caption about how young people today use mental illness diagnoses to avoid responsibility. This is defamation. He's lying about what happened and doing it publicly in a way that damages both our reputations. The recording I made protects us. I have documented evidence of exactly what was said. Dr. Zhao screenshot everything. I'm sending these to Lawrence. He's going to want to move forward with legal action immediately. The cease and desist letters were sent 3 days later. One to Dennis demanding he stop making false statements and issue a public apology. One to my parents putting them on notice about the financial coercion. My family's response was swift and ugly. Dennis's lawyer sent a response saying Dennis had done nothing wrong and threatening to countersue for harassment and intentional infliction of emotional distress. My parents called me directly despite Dr. Zhao's instructions and left a voicemail saying I had 1 week to come home, apologize to Dennis, and drop any legal threats, or they'd evict me from their house and stop all financial support, including the medical bills they'd been helping with. My father's voice on the recording was cold. We raised you better than this, Kaylee. We've been patient with your health issues, but this has gone too far. You've chosen to side with a doctor you barely know over your own family. That's unacceptable. If you want to continue living under our roof and receiving our support, you need to make this right with Dennis and stop this legal nonsense. Otherwise, you're on your own. I played it for Lawrence during our next video call. He listened with his expression getting progressively angrier. That's explicit coercion. They're conditioning your housing and medical support on you, abandoning legitimate legal claims and apologizing to someone who committed disability discrimination against you. That's illegal. He made notes. I'm accelerating our timeline. We're filing the defamation suit against Dennis immediately. And I'm recommending you file for a restraining order against your parents based on this harassment and the threats. A restraining order against my own parents? The idea felt surreal. But they're just trying to keep the family together. They think I'm overreacting. Lawrence looked at me seriously. Kaylee, they're threatening to make you homeless and cut off your medical support because you won't apologize for being publicly humiliated. That's not trying to keep a family together. That's abuse. The defamation lawsuit was filed on a Monday morning. By Monday afternoon, my entire extended family knew. My phone exploded with messages almost all negative. I was called ungrateful, vindictive, money-hungry, attention-seeking. Multiple relatives accused me of attacking a family member who was trying to help. My grandmother sent a long text about how I'd always been difficult and now I was tearing the family apart with my selfishness. My Aunt Stephanie posted on Facebook about how I was suing a family member over a simple misunderstanding and how that showed the entitlement of my generation. The post got shared dozens of times with comments from people I'd never met calling me every name imaginable. Dr. Zhao documented everything, sending screenshots to Lawrence. This is harassment and it's strengthening our case. Every false statement they make, every attempt to paint you as the aggressor adds to the pattern of discrimination and abuse. She looked at me carefully. How are you holding up? Physically, I was still in the flare. The prednisone had prevented it from becoming critical, but I was weak, exhausted, in constant pain. Emotionally, I was numb. Years of being taught that my family's opinion of me mattered more than anything else, warring with the new understanding that they'd been wrong all along. The restraining order hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Judith found an opening in a shared disability housing program. 3 bedrooms, 2 women already living there who both had chronic illnesses. The rent was subsidized through a medical charity, and the house had accessibility features. I could move in within days if I wanted. Dr. Zhao drove me to see it. The house was small but clean. My potential housemates were kind. Marissa had rheumatoid arthritis. Deandra had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. They both understood what it meant to have good days and bad days. They didn't question when I said I needed to sit down after walking from the car. They offered to help me move if I decided to take the room. Standing in that house surrounded by people who got it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. The possibility of belonging. I told them I'd take it. Over the next 3 days, with help from Dr. Zhao and Judith, I moved my belongings out of my parents' house while they were at work. I left a note explaining I was taking them up on their ultimatum and moving out since they'd made it clear my presence was conditional on abandoning my boundaries. My mother called within an hour of finding the note. Her voicemail was frantic. "Kaylee, what have you done? You can't just leave. Where are you staying? How will you afford this? Please call me back. We need to talk about this." My father's message was different. "Fine. If you want to choose your doctor and a lawsuit over your family, that's your choice. But don't come back when this all falls apart and you realize you can't make it on your own. We're done enabling your behavior." I saved both messages and sent them to Lawrence. More evidence of coercion and conditional support. He sounded satisfied. This actually helps our case. They're showing that their support was always conditional on you accepting their narrative about your illness. The restraining order hearing happened on a Friday morning. I sat in the courtroom with Lawrence and Dr. Zhao while my parents sat on the other side with their lawyer. The judge was a middle-aged woman who looked tired and skeptical of family disputes. Lawrence presented our case, the recording from the graduation party, the text messages threatening financial coercion, the voicemails conditioning housing on dropping legal action, the medical records showing disease flares correlating with family stress. My parents' lawyer argued they were concerned parents trying to help their difficult daughter. He said I was being manipulated by my doctor into seeing normal family dynamics as abuse. He called Dr. Zhao's involvement inappropriate and suggested she had boundary issues. The judge listened to the recording from the graduation party. She read the text messages. She reviewed the medical evidence. Her expression got progressively more concerned. When my parents' lawyer finished his argument, she looked at my parents directly. "Your daughter has a serious diagnosed medical condition requiring ongoing treatment." At a family event celebrating her educational achievement despite her disability, a family member publicly accused her of faking her illness. You sat there and said nothing. You then threatened to withdraw housing and financial support when she refused to apologize to the person who humiliated her. That's not concern, that's coercion. She granted a temporary restraining order requiring my parents to stay 500 feet away from me and prohibiting all contact except through attorneys. She scheduled a hearing for a permanent order in 30 days. My parents looked shocked. They'd clearly expected the judge to side with them. As we left the courtroom, my mother tried to approach me, but the bailiff intervened, reminding her the order was in effect immediately. I heard her crying as we walked away. Part of me felt guilty, but a larger part felt relief. The defamation case against Dennis moved forward. Discovery revealed he'd been making similar statements about me to family members and friends for years. Lawrence found emails where Dennis had told people I was faking lupus to avoid work and collect disability money. Text messages where he'd encouraged other family members to be tough on me and not enable my victim mentality. Social media posts predating the graduation party where he'd made vague statements about young people these days always finding excuses. The pattern was clear and documented. Dennis's lawyer tried to settle, offering to have Dennis remove the Facebook posts and issue a brief private apology. Lawrence rejected it. "We're going to trial. The pattern of behavior is too extensive to accept a weak settlement." He looked at me. "This might get worse before it gets better. Are you prepared?" I thought about living in a house where people believed me, having a doctor who validated my experience, building a support system that didn't require me to minimize my illness to be accepted. I'm prepared. The trial date was set for 4 months out. In the meantime, my life settled into a new normal. Living with Marissa and Deandra meant having housemates who understood when I needed to rest, who didn't question if I was really sick when I couldn't get out of bed, who celebrated good days without expecting me to maintain that energy level indefinitely. Dr. Zhao continued to monitor my health but also became something close to a friend. She'd check in not just about symptoms but about how I was doing emotionally. She connected me with support groups for young adults with lupus. She helped me find a patient advocacy organization where I could volunteer on good days. Dr. Finley, the therapist, helped me process years of invalidation and understand how chronic illness trauma had shaped my self-worth. I started to believe that I deserved support, that needing help wasn't weakness, that my family's failure to provide care wasn't my fault. My sister Jenna reached out eventually. She asked to meet for coffee and I agreed warily. We met at a cafe near my new house. She looked exhausted. "I should have defended you at the party. I've been thinking about it for months and I was wrong. I let family pressure convince me that keeping peace was more important than standing up for what was right. I'm sorry." I appreciated the apology but needed to understand. "Why didn't you?" In that moment when Dennis was saying those things, why did you stay silent? Jenna stared at her coffee. Because I've heard similar things my whole life. About how your illness takes up all of mom and dad's attention. How expensive your medical care is. How you've always been fragile and difficult. I guess I started believing it. When Dennis said what he said, part of me thought maybe he had a point. We talked for 2 hours. Jenna explained she'd started researching lupus after the lawsuit was filed. She'd read about autoimmune disease and chronic illness and realized how wrong she'd been. She'd tried to talk to our parents about educating themselves, but they'd shut her down, saying she was being influenced by my drama. She asked how she could support me going forward. I gave her resources to read, boundaries to respect, permission to rebuild our relationship slowly if she was willing to do the work. She was one of only 2 family members who reached out with genuine apology and willingness to learn. The other was my cousin on my mother's side, who'd also been diagnosed with an autoimmune condition and understood what I'd been experiencing. Everyone else either sided with Dennis and my parents or stayed silent to avoid conflict. The trial happened on a cold morning in January. The courtroom was packed. Dennis had apparently rallied his supporters to attend and show solidarity. The first 2 days were jury selection and opening statements. Lawrence laid out the case methodically. The recording from the graduation party, the social media posts, the pattern of defamatory statements over years. Dennis's lawyer argued that Dennis had been expressing concern, not making false accusations, that freedom of speech protected his opinions about my condition. The trial lasted a week. Dr. Zhao testified as an expert witness explaining lupus and the harm caused by disability discrimination. She described the correlation between family stress and my disease flares. She presented medical records showing my hospitalizations and the progression of organ damage. Dennis's lawyer tried to discredit her by focusing on her personal involvement in my life, but she remained calm and professional. I documented what happened at that party because I recognized medical abuse when I saw it. My personal commitment to helping my patient escape that abuse doesn't change the medical facts. Kaylee has a serious chronic illness that requires support, not interrogation. I testified about years of invalidation and the specific harm caused by Dennis's statements, how they'd reinforced family dynamics that prevented me from getting proper care, how the public humiliation had triggered a disease flare, how the ongoing defamation campaign had made it harder to maintain employment and housing. Dennis took the stand and insisted he'd been trying to help, that he was worried about me, that his statements were taken out of context. Lawrence destroyed him on cross-examination, playing the recording and asking Dennis to explain exactly how accusing me of faking disability for attention was helpful or concerned. The jury deliberated for 8 hours before returning guilty verdicts on defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. They awarded damages covering my medical bills from the post-party flare plus additional compensation for emotional harm. The judge issued a permanent injunction prohibiting Dennis from making any statements about my medical condition publicly or privately. Dennis's face went white when the verdict was read. He'd clearly expected to win, or at worst get a slap on the wrist. His lawyer immediately filed notice of appeal, but Lawrence wasn't concerned. The evidence was overwhelming. The appeal won't succeed. Outside the courthouse, reporters wanted statements. Lawrence handled most of it, but I said one thing. Invisible disabilities are real. Chronic illness isn't a choice or a personality flaw. Family members who question legitimate diagnoses cause real measurable harm. I hope this case helps other people with chronic conditions understand they don't have to accept abuse from family. The permanent restraining order hearing against my parents happened 2 weeks after the trial. They'd hired a different lawyer who tried a softer approach. He argued they were concerned parents who'd made mistakes but wanted to rebuild their relationship with me. The lawyer suggested mediated family therapy instead of a restraining order. Lawrence presented everything: the pattern of medical neglect, the financial coercion, the voicemails conditioning support on dropping legal action. The judge reviewed it all, then looked at my parents. You had years to educate yourselves about your daughter's condition and support her properly. You chose instead to question her diagnosis and create an environment where she couldn't access appropriate care. The temporary order stays in place and becomes permanent. If you want to rebuild this relationship, you need to demonstrate genuine change, not just desire for contact. She ruled no contact for 2 years with the possibility of supervised mediation after that if both parties agreed. My parents left the courtroom looking defeated. I felt something complicated. Relief that I was legally protected. Grief for the family I'd wanted but never actually had. Hope that maybe someday they'd do the work to change, but acceptance that they might not. 6 months after the trial, I was living a completely different life. I'd found a remote job doing medical writing that paid better than transcription and offered health insurance. My lupus was better controlled now that I was taking medications properly without guilt or financial pressure. I still had bad days, but the flares were less frequent. Living with people who understood chronic illness meant I could rest without judgment. Dr. Zhao remained my rheumatologist, but also became a genuine friend and mentor. She introduced me to her brother Kevin, who'd recovered from his suicide attempt and was living a full life with MS. He became another mentor, helping me navigate disability pride and self-advocacy. Through Kevin, I connected with disability rights organizations and started doing advocacy work. I shared my story anonymously at first, then eventually publicly. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people with chronic illness reached out saying they'd experienced similar family invalidation. that seeing someone successfully stand up to it gave them courage to set their own boundaries. I started a support group for people with chronic illness dealing with family dysfunction. It met monthly and grew quickly. We shared resources about finding safe housing, accessing disability benefits, navigating legal options for medical abuse. We celebrated each other's victories and supported through setbacks. 1 year after the graduation party, I hosted my own celebration at my shared house. The people who came weren't blood relatives. They were Dr. Zhao and Kevin, Marissa and Deandra, my housemates, Judith and Lawrence, who'd helped me escape, Dr. Finley, who'd helped me heal, Jenna, who'd done the work to repair our relationship, other support group members who'd become friends. We ate cake and laughed, and nobody questioned if I was really sick when I needed to sit down after 20 minutes. A woman at the party, someone I'd met through advocacy work, pulled me aside. She was newly diagnosed with lupus and struggling with family who didn't believe her. "Thank you for sharing your story. It gave me permission to protect myself even when my family says I'm overreacting. Can I ask how you found the courage to do it?" I thought about standing at that graduation party hearing Dennis attack me while everyone stayed silent. About Dr. Zhao standing up when no one else would. About the months of legal battles and family rupture. About slowly building a life where I didn't have to prove I was sick enough to deserve compassion. I didn't find the courage. It found me when staying silent became more painful than speaking up. You'll know when you're ready. 2 years after everything started, my parents requested mediation through the court system. They'd completed a family education program about chronic illness. They'd attended support groups for families of people with autoimmune disease. They'd written letters taking accountability for how they'd treated me. The mediator who reviewed their progress recommended supervised contact. I agreed to meet them with Dr. Finley present as a neutral third party. The first session was awkward and painful. My parents apologized but struggled to fully articulate what they were apologizing for. They wanted things to go back to normal but couldn't acknowledge that normal had been harmful. We met monthly for 6 months. Slowly, they started to understand. My mother cried when she realized how many times she'd minimized my symptoms. My father acknowledged the financial pressure he'd put on me around medications. They both expressed regret for not defending me at the graduation party and in the aftermath. The relationship we rebuilt was different from before, more boundaried, more honest, built on their demonstrated understanding rather than my performance of being less sick than I was. I saw them occasionally but maintained separate housing and financial independence. They didn't get to be my primary support system anymore. That role belonged to the chosen family I'd built. Dennis never apologized. He paid the judgment and went quiet on social media. We had no contact, and I preferred it that way. Some relationships couldn't be repaired, and that was okay. 3 years after Dr. Zhao stood up at my graduation party, I spoke at a medical conference about patient-family dynamics in chronic illness. I told my story to an audience of doctors and medical students. I talked about the harm caused by family invalidation and the importance of medical professionals recognizing and addressing it. After my presentation, dozens of medical students approached me. They wanted to know how to support patients dealing with similar situations. I gave them resources and strategies. I emphasized the importance of believing patients about their symptoms and experiences. That medical validation could be the difference between a patient getting proper care or spiraling into crisis. Dr. Zhao was in the audience. Afterwards, we got coffee and she told me how proud she was of the advocacy work I'd been doing. "You've turned your trauma into purpose. You're helping people escape situations that could have destroyed you. That takes incredible strength." I thought about how different my life would be if she hadn't been at that party, if she hadn't stood up and recorded and intervened. "You saved my life that day, not just by defending me but by showing me that I deserved to be defended, that my illness was real even when my family said it wasn't." Dr. Zhao smiled. "You saved yourself. I just provided the catalyst. Everything else was your courage and willingness to fight for your own health, even when it cost you everything familiar." We sat in that coffee shop talking about how far I'd come. From a young woman who'd been taught to doubt her own reality to an advocate helping others trust their experiences. From someone whose family conditionally supported her to someone who'd built a community of genuine care. The journey had been brutal, but on the other side was a life worth living. Surrounded by people who saw me clearly and supported me without requiring I be anything other than myself. That was the real graduation. Not the party that had been ruined, but the moment I finally graduated from believing I had to earn the right to be sick. If you enjoyed this, you'll definitely want to see the next ones too. So subscribe now and let me know your take in the comments.